The United States Supreme Court case of Caperton v. Massey has drawn attention to the issue of whether judges should be elected or appointed, and more specifically to the influence of election campaign contributions on judicial impartiality. The central issue the High Court will consider is whether a West Virginia Supreme Court justice should have disqualified himself from the case that Caperton had brought against Massey, and which Massey had appealed. That state court judge, Justice Brent Benjamin, had voted to overturn the $50 million judgment that Caperton had won against Massey in the lower courts. Caperton maintains that Justice Benjamin should have disqualified himself from the case because Benjamin owed his position on the court to the $3.5 million that a Massey executive contributed to Benjamin's election campaign to help Benjamin acquire his seat on the court. In the following December 2, 2008 interview by Scott Finn of West Virginia Public Broadcasting, West Virginia Circuit Judge O.C. Spaulding appears to disparage the democratic process of judicial election, although he does acknowledge that even a nonpartisan selection of judges will not remove the influence of politics from judicial decision-making. Unfortunately, Spaulding gives no consideration for independent judicial oversight or a mechanism that would hold judges accountable for improper conduct on the bench. Such a mechanism would focus on performance regardless of how the judge acquired his seat on the bench.
Judge Spaulding, do you know the history, and can you talk a little bit about why West Virginia is one of only a handful of states that has partisan election of judges?
Partisan election of judges began in the 1800s, championed by Andrew Jackson. The trend at that time was for the partisan election of judges, and that's the way most states did it. We're one of the few states that still adhere to the Jacksonian democracy ways of selecting judges. Some people feel that judges should not be subject to political pressures, that they ought to be making decisions based solely on the law, solely on the evidence. And I think most judges believe that. The issue becomes, how do you select judges that insulates them from political pressure? Selecting judges is by its nature political, and any way you do it, politics is going to be involved. And quite frankly, if you look at most of the surveys that have been done, show that generally people in West Virginia favor the election of a judge as opposed to the appointment by the governor.
How does having nonpartisan elections solve the problem of outside influence on elections? It seems like the solution that's being proposed doesn't necessarily have much to do with the problem, which is perceived conflicts of interest and undue political influence on the judiciary.
To answer your question more directly, partisan elections or nonpartisan elections do not in and of themselves eliminate the need for money to get yourself elected. So to that extent, they do not solve the problem.
Judge O.C. Spaulding, thank you for joining us today.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Bye-bye.